Hi, and welcome to CAMEO's Advocacy Day. Thank you for being patient. I am going to welcome Jesse Torres to the stage, which he's already is, and you can see his smiling face there. Jesse is chairman of the CAMEO board, and he is going to kick us off. Thank you, Jesse, for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today to our 2020 Advocacy Day and our first virtual Advocacy Day. I just want to start by saying I hope all of you are keeping safe, keeping healthy. I hope all your loved ones are healthy as well. It's great to have you with us for the rest of this afternoon. Again, my name is Jesse Torres. I'm the principal for Arroyo West. We're a management consulting firm based here in LA County. And I'm also privileged to be the board chair for CAMEO and to be welcoming you today. I would just say that now more than ever, it's important to be an advocate. CAMEO is continuing to double down on its resources to support those who are interested in becoming advocates for entrepreneurs. We're particularly focused on supporting underserved entrepreneurs. And so what you'll see is a real reinvestment in our work in advocacy. And it really begins with all of you and all of your support and collaborating in great events like this. I do want to give a quick shout out to Heidi, to Carolina, and the team who have put in a ton of work and to make sure that today's event is flawless. And so I'm excited to have you with us, excited to be welcoming you. I did want to mention that we do have a new Advocacy Championship membership as part of our levels of membership. And so I encourage you to consider that and support all the great work that CAMEO is doing around advocacy. But with that, thanks for being part of us today. I'm going to reconnect with you a little bit later as part of the agenda. But also thank you to all of our guests and to all of our panelists who are joining us here today and being part of our special virtual event. And with that, I'll turn it over to Carolina.
Thank you, Jesse. Well, we are thrilled to welcome you all to our second Advocacy Day on our first virtual. As you all know, 2020 has tested our flexibility and our resilience, and has also brought a spotlight to the impact of our work with underserved communities, showing that entrepreneurship is a vital and key avenue for minority and low-income communities to build their wealth. And however, it also brought the spotlight to the fact that they cannot do it on their own, and there is so much more work to do. In 2020, CAMEO's network of resource partners was called to action, with every single one of our almost 300 members seeing an increase in demand of services between 100 and 500%. All of you have received support from federal, state, or private partners to increase your services and fulfill the demand. You have continued to build your capacity to serve those that are falling through the cracks, and all of you have shown your creativity to deploy more services in very uncertain circumstances. Thank you for all your work. CAMEO is here to help and has focused all our efforts to continue advocating for more resources for all of you, to raise awareness about the needs of our entrepreneurs in these trying times, and to support your capacity building efforts to serve appropriately your clients. We're thrilled to see that the governor's budget has included so many great provisions to support the small businesses. And today we will have the opportunity to thank the governor's office and the state legislature for their support. But this will not be all. We will continue advocating for more resources, investing recovery funds when they are available into communities of color for small business development, reallocating existing resources to more efficient uses, and of course, strengthening the transparency in small business lending regulations and lender accountability. We need your help since it does take a network to achieve our goals. So let's get to work. We have planned a very interactive session. Feel free to type questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. And in fact, let's get started with all of you typing your name and organization into chat so you can see who is here today. Make sure you're typing to all panelists and attendees. And this, you can continue doing it during the session if you have any questions. You should also be able to see the speaker and the title slide side by side. But if that's not the case, you can click on View Options at the center top of your screen and select that option. You can also resize the title slides and a speaker video by clicking and dragging the two small vertical bars between the two screens to the left. CAMEO's team wants to thank you again for all your hard work and for joining us today. Hope you have a great time during our Advocacy Day, and let's get to work. Our first speaker is a person that most of you are familiar with by now. Isabel Guzman is California's Director of the Office of Small Business Advocate and serves as the lead on the Entrepreneurship Task Force for the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. She also serves as the co-chair of the Small Business Subcommittee for the Governor's Newsom's Task Force on Business and Jobs Recovery. Prior to her appointment, Isabel was a consultant in technology, commercialization, and an entrepreneur who co-founded an advisory firm focused on helping small business contractors leverage the federal marketplace. Isabel previously served in the Obama administration as the Deputy Chief of Staff at the U.S. Small Business Administration, where she oversaw policy across all program areas, including capital access, counseling, disaster assistance, contracting, international trade, and innovation. Before joining the Obama administration, Guzman co-founded small businesses and advised founders, growth companies, and Fortune 1000s across multiple sectors. Isabel, thank you so much for joining us today. And
always a pleasure.
Just yours.
Thanks for having me. Thanks so much, Carolina. I know you and your team have worked really hard today on this, but then throughout the year as well, to be advocates on behalf of small micro businesses and capital providers that support them. So I really appreciate that. And Jesse, thank you again for staying engaged in this space. It's always nice to see you. I know that I've spoken to many of you before, so you've heard a little bit about, of course, my office and GO-Biz, but for the benefit of any new folks that I have not been able to connect with, it's hard not to see you, to know in the audience. But just briefly, my office sits within GO-Biz, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. It is responsible for attraction, retention, and growth of businesses broadly, and of course, my office's role in that as an independent office is focused on small business and innovative startups. We really focus on providing resources and that information and specifics that help small businesses thrive. And so we have partnered mainly through this $20 million grant program that we administer for Capital Infusion Program and Technical Assistance Expansion Program to create this network of grantees throughout the state, currently 86, that really provide those resources directly to small businesses, our boots on the ground, so to speak, and really help us better channel the information and the knowledge that's at the state level or across our partners into the hands of small businesses. The second area is really around advocacy, and that's where I channel my past experiences more broadly in really looking at access to capital. And for those of you who have heard me before, you know that I'm focused on small dollar loans, especially, as well as early stage venture for underserved communities, women and minorities who have not gained access in particular. And then access to markets, the revenue side of the equation, really being interested in the access to markets through procurement, so supply chain, both state government procurement, which my office is tasked with overseeing and connecting with advocates across the state, as well as just broadly in the private supply chains. And then e-commerce, and previously, or always talked about e-commerce, you might be familiar with how I've phrased it before, but really e-commerce as a pathway to markets around the world. And we know in today's environment, that is just e-commerce to survive and be viable in today's marketplace with COVID-19. And then lastly, access to networks and resources. And we've tried to improve our touch points with small businesses and organizations to ensure that we really are truly capturing the needs and opportunities and barriers that they're facing. And so we've launched an entrepreneurship task force in order to create that connection. And so we're quite active with that group of entrepreneurs, and it's grown to 15 members who are truly committed to helping entrepreneurs and emerging entrepreneurs and small businesses really excel. I know that I was mentioned that I am serving on the Governor's Task Force for Business and Jobs Recovery and the Small Business Subcommittee in particular. And of course, that group was launched under the leadership of co-chairs Tom Steyer and the Chief of Staff Anna Leary to chart a path forward on recovery in the wake of COVID-19. And truly, that work has been, led by multiple amazing leaders. I think it's almost 100 people on that task force, but really who have committed, personal time, their organization's time to help us on the path to recovery. In addition to that group, though, I thought it was important, and the administration, the governor's office thought it was important that we include broad voices beyond. And so through my office, I launched two smaller recovery groups, a small business recovery group and an innovative startups recovery group. And CAMEO, of course, joined the small business recovery group. We had capital providers, center provider leadership, et cetera, just on their ethnic chambers to share with us what they were seeing in their membership base. And then on the innovative startup side, those tech commercialization office, accelerators, venture, just to see what was happening with those small businesses as well. So, I say all these groups to tell you, like, there have been so many folks who have stepped up to the table to try to engage and offer ideas and exchange. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today as well about what's happening with small business in the wake of COVID-19 and what we can do. We know that small businesses and small business majority, I do see Mark's name in the group. They gave us some statistics early on, which were frightening, that, up to 44% of small businesses in California were either closed or were at risk of closing. And just keeping that number in mind through this whole time, we know that they've been contending with closures. We know that, as we've tried to control the spread and have had to force some closures even recently, that's had its impact, decreased revenues, and top that with the difficulty accessing capital and the programs that were put out there to support small businesses. And we've seen the disparate impact on, minority-owned firms as well. But at the same time, we've seen so many of their inspiring stories, really like speaking to their tenacity to survive, their ability to change and do what was necessary to keep going. And as the governor says, meet the moment. So we really focused in on their ability to pivot and adapt and how we could help them do that. And so with the governor's task force, we launched an initiative calling all Californians Shop Safe, Shop Local, which was to rally Californians to safely spend locally and online, while also amplifying resources to support small businesses. And we really have been leaning into the e-commerce frame. We know that, recent polls, I believe Facebook put out the poll that 76% of small businesses polled were relying on more digital tools now than ever. And a third said they would have closed all or part of their businesses without those digital tools. And 51% reported increased online sales. And so what we wanted to do is find corporate partners to participate with us, many leading on the governor's task force, to join with us to support small businesses as they recover, pivot, adapt, or position to reopen. So let me just can I share my screen, Carolina or Heidi? Am I able to? Let's see. If I can, I'll briefly show you all the website. Still disabled. There we go. Now I can. So this is the campaign, which what we're offering to small businesses is really some, hopeful resources for them, both to, access great partner offers and tools, which I'll take you to next, but as well lean in on the industry guidance. Obviously, we led with Shop Safe for a reason. We want to make sure that small businesses are a part of the dialogue in helping us control the spread of the disease, as important leaders in their community and as employers, et cetera. We wanted to be able to connect to PPE marketplaces that we've been working hard to develop, and connect to the amazing free consultants that exist within our network and partners. But the partner offers and resources, which are still available all through the month to access, and we might extend much of it, we're looking into it, continuing through the disaster to accommodate businesses that have had to close. But you see, GoDaddy has free website for as long as you need it. You can get special ad pages on Nextdoor, which has an incredible reach to your neighborhoods and communities. And so there are wonderful offers all throughout the campaign and lift by all these corporations, as well as our partners. So, within the community. So our statewide organizations, as well as, soon to be some more regional folks and players. The other thing that's a benefit to this campaign that we thought would help small businesses is the ability to market. We want them to increase revenues. We're calling on individual consumers to go spend locally safely with their masks, but we're also trying to help the businesses figure out to market. Obviously, the corporate partners tools are highly useful, but for us, we wanted to offer them some free tools, logos that they could use in their social media, actual posts with content that they could use, so that it was a turnkey operation for them to promote the initiative and reach their clients. So that was the focus of this initiative, was really trying to drive some revenues to small businesses, knowing how critical those, that cash flow situation was for many of them. And we wanted to be able to help them adapt as soon as possible. The other area, which I know many of the members of CAMEO are involved with and a part of as well, is just this whole issue of capital. And we knew going in that nearly half of small businesses only had 15 days of cash flow, and now more recently they were polled and nearly a third said cash flow is the most significant challenge over the next few months. So it was important early on for us to push on disaster response. Ever since PSPS, before, we had been in talks and trying to figure out what we could do around this realm. So in some respects had developed some partnerships. So early on, started talking to grant makers. We knew that they could deploy much more quickly. And so you saw some early grant activity happening at different cities backed by big funders. And so we had a lot of those early conversations with the California grant makers, different organizations, as well as corporate philanthropy. But beyond that, we knew that the state and the federal government would need to respond. Governor Newsom did step in early with the response, allocating $50 million to an existing program, the Disaster Relief Loan Guarantee Program, but requiring that it be for those businesses that were most at risk or not able to access the federal program, and small dollar amounts, 50,000 and under. And we had heard from the CDFI community that was something that was of interest. So that happened early on. It launched, it was funded the same day that PPP opened. So of course, we shifted our priority to that federal program. It's interesting that early rounds, California was not doing well in the program. We had 6.8% of the number of loans, and 9.76% of the dollar loans in the first round. So it was really low in California. We continued to try to push as hard as possible through, Wells joined in, FinTech, CDFIs, et cetera. By the end, we fared much better. We've reached so far 67.5 billion. Numbers changing quite rapidly. In fact, has gone down as the SBA corrects some of their numbers. But this program, SBA, we ended up with a much higher percentage, 11.9% of the number of loans and 13.03% of the dollar loans. But we know that that's not enough. A lot of businesses have not been able to access. EIDL is still available, but EIDL advances have closed. The state has received 27.4 billion in EIDL loans and 2.6 billion in the EIDL advances. But we know they needed more. The legislature acted with the governor in his budget. He proposed additional funding for the Small Business Finance Center. And so we received an additional 50 million plus 25 million for CDFI liquidity. And so there's a total of 125 million with iBank Small Business Finance Center to really help us address capital issues over the coming months for small businesses, especially dependent on what we'll see at the federal level happening. So there's lots going on the capital front. I'm happy to talk about. The last thing I want to mention is just our business center network that we support from the state of California. And of course, I said that that's really key for reaching businesses directly. We have certain priorities. The statute actually requires that this be given as a preference for underserved business groups. So those grant programs that are administered, the $20 million total, is $3 million for capital infusion, but the technical assistance expansion program, $17 million, does have a priority for expansion to underserved business groups, women, minorities, veterans, low wealth communities, rural, disaster impacted. So we have really tried to lift this network with collaboration and making sure there are partnerships across the state so that there are best practices deployed and that we see we see that strength. Our WBCs, I see Nancy's on, have joined together as an example and have some joint initiatives statewide so that you can have the same level of service and quality throughout the state that we want to see across our small business networks. They've prioritized capital readiness, market readiness, including e-commerce and procurement. They've prioritized resiliency. And so we continue to see their performance develop as we add more metrics to hold accountable to the legislative intent of the statute and the performance that we want to see over the 5 years of this program. I'm very hopeful with the types of results and the types of activities we're seeing across the state. So I know that, that's an important part of our office. And so wanted to share with you some of my priorities within that area. With that, I would like to just wrap, see if we have any time for questions. I know we're running a little bit late, but I welcome your thoughts, your feedback, what you're seeing on the ground with small businesses. That's what really inspires my office completely. The voice of small business is what gives me advocacy. At the state level, it's my passion. I've been a business owner. My family are all entrepreneurs, and my experience really informs that. So I look forward to continuing to partner with you through the year and on your Day of Advocacy.
Thank you, Isabel. Please remember, everybody in the audience, that you can make some type your question to the Q&A box or in the chat, and we'll be happy to make the question. Isabel, one little thing before we move is it might be good for everybody to know about the PPE that you've been putting in the governor's office has been actually deploying throughout the state. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. So the CalOS, the Office of Emergency Services, in my office collaborated to disperse the PPE to as many small businesses, especially those underserved and disproportionately impacted communities as possible, in order for them to get that supply that was needed for masks or hand sanitizer, et cetera, especially before we could open the marketplace. So there's the safelymakingca.org website that connects California providers of PPE to small businesses, but we wanted you to have that 30 days of PPE so you could take it now and be able to utilize it. I know they're still distributing it in certain places throughout the state, but we partnered with centers as well as other chambers, et cetera, trying to reach these groups. And they've been dispersing, I know, San Diego, Imperial Valley, the Central Valley, the far north, the Bay Area, Los Angeles. Everyone's taken on some partnerships locally, regionally to be able to distribute. It's been a massive operation, obviously, especially with businesses closed and centers closed. They've had to be creative on how they distribute that. But I just asked for the final counts, but we do have millions of PPE items dispersed throughout the state to small businesses, through the governor's office and the Office of Emergency Services. And if anyone's interested, of course, you could reach out to my office to see about partnering with the leads that we have identified on the ground who are coordinating with, various nonprofits and organizations locally to get this out.
Fantastic. Thank you, Isabel. I think it goes back to me. This is Jesse again. And before I take it further, I just will say thank you to Isabel. For those of you who know her to be a tireless small business advocate, and the work that her and her team are doing, not just on PPE, but on, direct sales support for small businesses, just everything she's doing behind the scenes to make it all happen has been pretty incredible. And Heidi, I think my video is not working, but I'm going to keep going because I know we're on timeline. I did want to just before I go ahead with my introduction of our next speaker, I did want to give a quick shout out to Carolina Martinez because I did not give her proper justice in my intro, just to say thank you to her for her leadership for CAMEO during this very unusual time. So sorry, Heidi, I don't think my video is working right now, so I'm going to keep going and apologize to everyone. Heidi, are you still able to hear me?
We can still hear you, Jesse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Well, yeah, I apologize for some technical glitch on my side here. Well, it's my pleasure at this point to introduce another champion for small businesses here in the state, Assemblymember Monique Limon, who's going to be joining us and sharing some thoughts with us. The Assemblymember was elected in 2016. She represents Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. She has worked continuously to serve her community as an educator, leader, and advocate for causes advancing the quality of life in her community. Her main priorities include education of women, and she also, most importantly for today, is the chair of the Assembly Banking Committee. She was an influential force in the passage of SB 1235 and ensuring that it would be a good bill that would offer true transparency for small business lending. Last year, she authored a rate cap bill for consumer loans ranging from $2,500 to $10,000, something that many business owners who are just starting and need a computer or a car or some equipment have benefited from. I also just want to give a personal thank you to her. I had a chance to do an event with her a few years back during the fire season there, the fire impact that we had in the Santa Barbara area a couple of years ago. So I know her to also be a champion in the event of disaster. And so with that, let me turn over to Assemblymember Monique Limon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the introduction and the partnership that we've had over the years. I'm happy to be able to connect with you all today. I know that Advocacy Day 2020 doesn't look like Advocacy Day in past years, and I think that that's the true reality for a lot of us. You know, small businesses really are the heart and soul of our communities and help provide a foundation that I think makes California an exceptional place to live and to be in. And certainly this is not a time where things are easy for any entity, any industry, any space. This is a challenging time, but we do have a set of diverse, very diverse small businesses in our state that I think could go up against any region in the country. Or the map in terms of really offering so many rich, you know, products, services, you know, and benefits to our community as a whole. I think we oftentimes know and recognize that California is a leader to the world in a lot of different industries. And I think that you will find that when we make those statements, it really is the presence of strong businesses that make that happen, from food, beverage, to the arts and entertainment, to travel and leisure, technology, scientific research. I mean, the list goes on in terms of the contributions of small business to the overall, not just economy of California, but the presence of California globally. Our competitive advantages in the state really are the diversity, I think, in residents that we have, the diversity in businesses. A small business is a pathway for that diversity to be expressed throughout our economy in ways that benefit not just Californians, but also anyone who visits or does business with these companies. I know that I'm happy to see that CAMEO and the small business community is organizing, like usual, to make their voices and presence heard in Sacramento. I think it's important. And let's, you know, let's also understand that while CAMEO represents small businesses, certainly big businesses in California have the advantages of having their own lobbyist, either in-house or through contracts. And so sometimes through the big business lobbyist or the big, you know, associations, those voices get heard, and those voices sometimes get put as a priority over, you know, small businesses. But it's so important that each of you have a voice. I think it's important that small businesses also organize to make sure that legislators hear your voice. And we've been able to do that through some of the partnership. I deeply, deeply appreciate the, you know, that CAMEO and similar organizations put forward and create a unified voice for small businesses. I think the more we can do that, the stronger and the louder the voice gets. And I think that that's important because sometimes there are different perspectives, not just for constituents, but also from the perspective of business, depending on the size of the business. And I think that that's important. Currently, as you all know, and as you all are feeling, we're engaged in a number of serious issues and serious challenges for our society since the Great Depression. And it's really hitting us all across the state in so many areas, from public health care to education to the economy to housing, state, local government, you name it. And we have challenges in front of us. And all of these problems are interrelated. I think that we can't just look at them as isolated problems. We are seeing that in this moment, we are very aware of the intersection that all of this has. Public health has with education, with the economy, with business growth, with environment, you name it. There's a strong intersection, and we're having to look at these sectors in ways that we haven't had before. And certainly small businesses are being hit very hard. We understand that the restrictions of our daily activities prevent worst case, public health and health effects for our community, but also present some complications and sometimes a little bit of a maze for our small businesses. And I think that some of you know that I have, family members who are small business owners. So oftentimes I see some of this lived out and experienced through their lens, through seeing what they're going through as small business owners. And I know how hard they are working to try to keep up with the challenges that we have in front of us, and know that they're not alone, that every sector is, in this type of space at the moment. So I think the environment is changing on a daily basis. We all see the guidelines and what's in front of us. And we are doing everything to put the health of our community first, because we know without that, everything continues to have a trickle. But certainly it doesn't mean that all of us as legislators we would like to be in a different place. We want to go back to, there's moments where we want to go back to the old way of being. And there's actually other moments that have been opportunities to say the old way of how we did things simply wasn't working. And this is an opportunity to change it and do better. And so during my time, I think in the legislature and during the 3 years that I've been in the Assembly, I've specifically focused on the importance of responsible lending, transparency, not just for individual consumers, but for small businesses as well. And that continues to be an issue that, again, in the pandemic, we're seeing comes up. It's equally important now more than ever that when small businesses are going out to get loans, that opportunity is there, transparency is there, equitable and fairness practices are there, and that we don't take advantage of some of these hardworking small businesses during a difficult time. I think when issues of commercial financing have come up, I know that some of you followed and were supportive of what we've been able to do. And there was a bill that went through the state Senate last year that we were able to get out, that we all worked on and we were all supportive. Very often when we hear consumer protections and what's good for consumers, I think that people sometimes apply a narrow definition that it just applies to an individual, but really all of us, all of you are consumers. So when we talk about consumer protections, we are talking about protections for everyone. And again, protections that ensure fair, equitable practices, protections that ensure transparency, and protections that ensure access. But we also know that in the space that we're in, sometimes we don't see that. And so our effort in this last year has been to continue to look at that, and also in the legislature find ways that we can be advocates so that you, the consumer, and also you, the small business owner who serves consumers, can have the best available support financially from financial institutions. We are excited that the conversations haven't, that the conversations continue, but we're also troubled by the fact that the conversations have become more complicated during this pandemic. We see that businesses who are savvy, who sometimes have more staff, are able to access some of these opportunities more so than some of the small businesses. And a lot of us have been advocating for ways to ensure that small businesses also have access to some of these resources, that minority-owned businesses also have access to these resources. We've done that through some of the funding that you've seen through the infrastructure bank, the iBank, for small business, specifically going to some of the minority owners. But also, here's one thing that we are all working on right now, and I know CAMEO has been very supportive, that we know that for small business, part of the equation, there's many elements of the equation that help a small business be successful. And one of those includes a fair market competition. And we understand that small businesses want to be able to compete with other businesses, and a fair market allows that. So together, I think we are advocating for the expansion of the Department of Business Oversight to be able to ensure that all businesses have a more fair playing field. We know that that's not always the case. We know that there's flaws in the system. And I appreciate that advocacy. I think it's an important advocacy. I think it's very, very, very timely. And sometimes people only see the expansion of a regulatory agency as something that means more paperwork, or, you know, for them themselves. However, it's also important to recognize that, you know, a regulatory agency ensures all entities are playing by the same set of rules. And small businesses, we know, benefit from that. We absolutely know it. So I'm grateful that CAMEO is in this, you know, conversation with us about the way that small businesses could also benefit from consumer protections broadly. So excited to be here with all of you. Grateful that we've been able to work together over the last few years in the Assembly. And I wanted you all to know that we're also in this struggle together. These are challenging times, but we continue to want to do what's best for our community and try to work with small businesses despite the many, many imperfections that we are facing and the struggles that we are facing in our local communities, but also in the state, nation, and globally. So happy to take any questions if there's any questions. And again, thank you so much for all the work you do. Please don't stop united and being a strong voice. The legislature needs to hear your voice.
Jesse, this is Heidi. I'm gonna ask one question if that's okay. And Assembly Member Limon, Chair Limon, thank you so much. It's really great to hear this voice and have a champion for this responsible lending stuff. It's so important because we see what happens when it doesn't, unfortunately. Anything specific that you advise us that we can do around this expansion?
Absolutely. I think it's really, really important for all of you to advocate with your individual state legislators. There's 120 state legislators. And, you know, one of the things that I sometimes hear is, well, this isn't good for business. But I actually think that your voice, you know, in terms of saying, look, the reason that expanding this Department of Business Oversight is good is because it creates, you know, a better, more transparent, equitable playing field for small businesses. And I think that that's one of the narratives I've not heard mentioned in this. And honestly, coming from me is very different than coming from a small business owner. And so everything you can do to make sure that your legislators, the individuals that represent you across the state, collectively understand that this is good for small business. And you know, it's okay to recognize that the perspective of small business may be different than the perspective of, you know, larger businesses and, you know, national and global corporations in our state. And so I would say that that's the most important thing you can do. As a reminder, this is not a bill. This is it's a budget trailer bill. So it's slightly different. You're not, you know, in this particular case, advocating for a bill that's authored by, you know, an assembly member. It's a trailer bill that the governor has proposed. He included the expansion in both his January and his May revise in the budget. And so we only have until the end of August to possibly get that out. But it is so important that your legislators know that you're supportive. You know, I've seen 3 legislators sign on to a letter against this idea, and I don't think they've heard from you. So I would love for them to hear from you to make sure that they, you know, understand that small businesses want this.
Assemblymember, this is Jesse Torres. Hopefully you can hear me again. I have a personal question because it's such an unusual time, you know, with COVID-19, and I think so many people are uncertain about what is the best way to engage with their representatives, you know, because of social distancing, et cetera. How have you been approaching it? What do you recommend? You know, what's the best way to engage with your team? And for those of you know, those folks who've never maybe done it really before, any recommendations you can provide so they can do it in a safe kind of way.
Absolutely. Email, calls, and Zoom. That's the way that we've been doing it. I think that there's a way that you can get maybe 2 or 3 small businesses representing CAMEO's voice on a Zoom call with a legislator or with the legislative staff that deal with this particular policy issue. But don't underestimate the importance of sending individual emails to your legislators supporting some of these things. While we may be doing work differently in the California State Legislature, we're still doing the work. And so I think don't underestimate that maybe because we can't physically see you in Sacramento or physically see you in the district, that we're not listening and we're not paying attention to what's happening. So please, please reach out to your legislators, again, via email, calls, or Zoom.
Thank you.
I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be Zoom. I guess it could be any other platform, but you know what I mean, virtually.
Of course. Thank you so much. Thank you for your participation, for supporting CAMEO, for supporting all your small business owners. We're really grateful to have you part of our day today, and hope you have a very safe.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for being great advocates. I look forward to continuing to partner together.
Thank you so much. So now I have the pleasure to introduce you to Assemblymember Weber. And for those of you who don't know Assemblymember Shirley Weber's story, it's what the American dream represents. She was born to sharecroppers in Arkansas and moved to California at 3 years old. She attended UCLA, where she received her BA, MA, and PhD by the age of 26. Prior to receiving her doctorate, she became a professor at San Diego State University at 23, and now she represents San Diego County in the State Assembly. She's been active in economic justice all her life and authored ACA 5, which was passed by both houses of the legislature in June. ACA 5, now Prop 16, would repeal Prop 209, a measure that effectively ended affirmative action in California. Dr. Weber says, since becoming law in 1996, Proposition 209 has cost women and minority-owned businesses $1.1 billion each year. It has perpetuated a wage gap wherein women make 80 cents on every dollar made by men, and has allowed discriminatory hiring and contracting processes to continue unhindered. It is a pleasure to have you with us, so welcome, Assemblymember Weber.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today to extremely important discussions about women and particularly about small businesses and how it fits into California's world and California's economy. So I'm really pleased to be here with you. You know, the unique thing about dealing with this issue and us trying to continue to legislate as we have with COVID and now with the issue of David Floyd and so much going on in California. This has revealed in many ways some real big cracks in California in terms of our economy, our issues of fairness and justice and equality and all those things that we have fought for and that we believe is really the foundation of California's economy, California's life. And yet when something like a pandemic hits, it has its most adverse effect on those who are the least in our society, those who have the least amount of resources, those who don't have access to health care, those who don't have the things that we sometimes think that are fundamental things that need to be there. So this pandemic has really emphasized to us the tremendous amount of work that we have to do in California as we begin to rebuild California after the pandemic. We will, the governor and members of the Legislative Black Caucus, as well as some of the other caucuses, the Women's Caucus and others, have said that as we come out of this pandemic, we don't want to come out and be the same as we were before. We want to come out and be better because we've seen the problems and the cracks and the families and the children and the women who are sometimes left behind with the least amount of resources. And as this pandemic hits, it has a chilling effect upon all of those groups. When we met with the governor, we used an old adage that is often talked about in the Black community, that when the larger society catches a cold, Black people catch pneumonia. That whatever happens is going to have a much more adverse effect on those. And that applies across the board to those with the least of us. So I'm really pleased to be with you today for just a brief moment. Obviously, your conference is running rather quickly, and there have been some great people on. I'm pleased to follow Ms. Limon, who has been a major leader in our house in the area of banking and finance. I've been on the banking committee for the last 8 years. I think I'm the most senior member on the banking committee. And I've been pleased to see her leadership in terms of taking on those hard issues that affect the small businesses, that affect those who are struggling in our community, who are sometimes preyed on by unethical lenders. And as a result, instead of the situation becoming better, the situation becomes worse. And so I'm pleased to see that is being a major agenda item that we're pushing forward to do this. I'm sure most of you get tired of hearing so many times over and over that the small businesses are the backbone of California. The small businesses is what California is about. That the vast majority of businesses in California are small businesses. You hear that a lot, and you would think that you feel very appreciated by hearing that. And yet every friend I know who has a small business says, la, 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 don't tell me that again, because I don't really always see it. They're committed to the business that they offer. They're committed to providing the services and resources that are there. But sometimes they become weary because it doesn't seem like the things that are happening in the state directly affect what's happening with them on the ground. And so it becomes important then that we have to make sure that all the things we do have a positive effect upon those who are running our small businesses, who are trying to keep those doors open, keep those individuals employed, and keeping food on their own family's table so they can continue to move forward. I was asked to address the issue of ACA 5, Proposition 16, and AB 3121, the bill on reparations, and to hopefully share some of those issues that we think are important that will be hopefully addressed in this. ACA 5, some of you may remember that in 24 years ago, Proposition 209 ended affirmative action. And it ended it with a lot of controversy. It ended up with a lot of misinformation. It used Dr. King's quote that I don't want to be judged by the color of my skin, but the content of my character, which was a part of his dream speech. And he talked about what he wanted to happen in the future, but he also talked about what needed to happen in the immediate present in order to ever get to that future. And so people got caught up in that and got caught up in thinking, well, this is the civil rights era. This is 2009. This is how you really do civil rights. You become you have equal opportunity for everyone. And that sounds good on the surface, and most of us sign on to those things. But the reality is that if the situation is unequal, if the playing field is slanted against you, and you've got a higher mountain to run up and to climb, then somebody needs to look at that mountain and that playing field and say, wait a minute, this is not an equal situation. So for me to try to apply an equal issue in this situation, I need to look at it differently. Maybe I need to look at the issue of equity and make sure that everyone gets a level playing field. So when Prop 209 passed some 24 years ago, most of us didn't know exactly what would happen with it. We thought it was one thing, and it turned out to be something totally different. It's interesting that those who supported Proposition 209, we thought it was supported by a community that was concerned about the University of California and making sure that certain kids had equal opportunity to be at the university. But it was actually funded through the building industry. It was funded through those who felt they were losing contracts to the city, to women and minorities. And so it was actually funded by them, but it was promoted in all of the ads as if it were an education issue. And so what we've seen over the past 24 years, we've seen some ups and downs in our university enrollment, and our universities have become better in figuring out how to get a diverse student population, because they want a diverse student population, because that's important for any kid to have a good education, to be in an environment where there are all kinds of folks who can be a part of it. And it's an investment in California to have all of our students able to access the universities when they qualify to be there. But in addition to that, but most important, what I saw in looking at it was I saw that the opportunities that we had created for women and minority businesses and the disabled and the veterans to do contracts in cities almost went away immediately. In San Diego, we saw, and I was on the Equal Opportunity Commission in the year 2010, from the beginning of the period in terms of when Prop 209 went into effect in the mid-1990s, we saw the movement away from equal opportunity and access, so much so that the number of women doing businesses in San Diego went from something like 40%, women and minorities, about 40% of all the contracts, went down to 1.5%. And it still is at 1.5% of the contracts and vendors' opportunities in the city of San Diego went down. When I was on the school board for the first time, and that was in 88 to 96, was the first time that we actually had women, minorities, others doing business with the school district, but in addition to that, designing our schools, things that were old boy network that people just kind of did without thinking about how you do them. We saw that decline. We saw that those things become fairer and people began to do businesses with our schools. Since then, we've gone back to the old way because no one wants to be sued under Prop 209. No one wants to say, oh, you gave them a special opportunity, and as a result, that ended it. We also saw that our ability to outreach into certain areas, for instance, we lament a lot about STEM education, that women are not involved in science and math and all those things that we think are in engineering, those things that are important, STEM education. Well, what's happened is that we're not able to, as a school district, as a state entity, to offer programs that really particularly appeal to women and young girls. Why? Because that would be discriminatory against men according to Prop 209. And so we're not able to effectively level the playing field because we can't address those issues. When I was on the school board, we had specific programs that dealt with young women. We had Latina females who were not interested in going to college. And we realized that was a cultural issue. So we basically hired individuals who could go into our schools and motivate our young people to go to college, and they did. I mean, they became much more active in school, the grades improved. We did the same thing with African-American males who were failing miserably in 1990, and all of a sudden, we got involved, hired some men who could come in as mentors to work with them, and before we knew it, we had begun to solve the problem that we're facing academically. Prop 209 took all that away. It took away our Black Mentor program. It took away our female program, our Hmong program for young girls. And what we had to do was then create a program for everybody, which means those programs became somewhat ineffective because they couldn't target the individual, the culture, and those things that really were at the heart of the problem. So Prop 209 did all of those things to us, and we've lost lots and lots of money. Women in terms of businesses are not being attracted to businesses in terms of the contracts for the city that's there. And it's interesting to me because if you talk to many of you, you get the story of how you've been used to get contracts and yet they don't have to follow through with you on those contracts. And so what we've seen over and over again is the decline in women businesses, ownership of businesses. And the interesting thing is that we've looked at this and in addition to those things, a lot of times folks just leave the state of California because it's so hard as a woman, as a minority to do business here, because we're only one of 8 states that don't do affirmative action. Every other state has strong, robust affirmative action outreach programs to encourage people to go to school, to encourage them to come in. Doesn't mean that they get it. It's not a quota program, but it is a program that's designed to introduce young people, introduce women and others into areas that they have not normally been a part of, and to try to create apprenticeship programs and things to get them involved. And so what we've seen is the decline in those activities have had an adverse effect upon women, upon their businesses. There is no better way to build a business than with a government contract. We know that because that's a business that pays you a check every month. That's a contract that pays you, and therefore you are able to participate and then grow your business because now you've got a foundation to grow it upon. So we're excited over the fact that we were able to pass ACA 5. Most folks, we thought we couldn't. In fact, and most of my colleagues who were excited about it didn't think we could pull it. Didn't think we could pull it off. But we did, because it's a high bar. In order not to have to collect signatures and spend millions of dollars doing that, we had to get 2/3 votes in the Assembly and 2/3 votes in the Senate. And so, which meant I needed 54 votes in the Assembly and I needed 27 votes in the Senate. We ended up with 60 votes in the Senate Assembly and 30 votes in the Senate. So as a result, we were able to get the bill passed, and now it's on the ballot. It's Prop 16. We're working very hard to engage everyone to be involved. Our statewide association of minority women, not minority, but our statewide association of women businesses is very active, involved in getting it passed out of the Assembly, and now it's very actively involved in trying to get it passed in November. If it's passed in November, we only need plus one. And we will then obviously be able to, once again, to rev up our programs for affirmative action. And many of our state agencies have called, they're excited because they have been hampered in their ability to do outreach, hampered in their ability to hopefully help women and small businesses to figure out how to do contracting, how to put the proposals together, those kinds of things. Now they would be released and able to do that and hopefully provide a better sense of engagement for women. So we're excited about it. This is going to be on the ballot in November, and it's Proposition 16. We hope every woman, every person of color, every male who is concerned about the future of California will vote for this particular bill, because it really will change the game in California for business and for economic development and for education and opportunities for everyone. Lastly, let me just simply say, someone asked me to talk about AB 3121, which is California reparations bill. And this bill is based on developing a 8-person commission whose task will be to determine whether or not, to look at, to see what kinds of discriminations have occurred that have had a negative impact on the economic development of African Americans in the state of California. When one looks at the economy, when one looks at wealth in California, wealth across the nation, African Americans have the least amount of wealth. Their wealth value is in the minus when everyone else is in the $75,000 worth of wealth, mostly because of lack of home ownership, ownership of businesses, all those kinds of things that really build wealth. And so this is looking at what has happened in California. And most will say, well, California wasn't a slave state. It wasn't a slave state, but it encouraged and participated in slave activities and fugitive slave laws that passed. It forbid African Americans to go to court to defend themselves for their land and their property. It basically redlined the communities in terms of economic development. And so when you begin to look at the kinds of activities that occurred in California and across the nation, you discovered that at every effort that was made to basically talk about economic development for African Americans, it was thwarted. It's the only group that has never been given any reparations. We give reparations even to communities and groups that weren't impacted by California. We recently gave reparations to Jews in New York during Obama's era, which was, a wonderful thing to do, but we did not cause a Holocaust yet. We gave reparations. I forgot how many millions of dollars in reparations. Recently, there's been efforts at reparations in Rosewood in Florida in terms of educating the kids whose land was taken from them. So there's an effort now to look to say, there's more than just an issue here, because you've got 400 years of free labor. You've got 400 years of discrimination. You've got 400 years of laws and rules and regulations that hampered and hindered the development of an entire community. And as a result, there should be some look at it to say, what have we done in terms of education, opportunities, jobs, businesses, those kinds of things. What have we done to try to at least make some amends of that? So this 8-person commission will address that issue and come back to the legislature with recommendations as what California needs to do to basically begin to repair the damage it's done as a result of free labor and as a result of the discrimination against African Americans in California. So that's where we are. I'm more than happy to answer questions. We've got a lot of things happening. The pandemic and has had a tremendous impact on all of us. But I think it has also, as I tell someone, it's also had some positive impacts that it makes us realize that we can continue to meet and can continue to talk to each other. As we do that, it makes all of us reassess who we are and our relationships and how we can actually still survive in a situation where we are so different than what we're accustomed to. That doesn't mean we're not looking forward to getting out of the virus situation and out of this pandemic. But as I tell people, I've learned a lot about myself and I've learned a lot about my family and my ability to survive in a situation such as a pandemic. So more than happy, glad to be here and more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Assemblymember Weber. We do have one question, and it's about what is the current status of AB 3121? Who is co-sponsoring?
There are a number of sponsors for AB 3121. ADOS is one, but the bill has passed through the Senate. It is, through the Assembly in good condition with very little opposition. It is now in the Senate side. It is going to be going to the committee. They haven't decided the committee that it will go to yet. We'll get that information in the next few days. but we anticipated passing. The governor has expressed support for it. Others have expressed support for doing this. It's the kind of thing that people are doing across the nation. And we didn't want to do it just to say, oh, we want reparations, so give us X amount of money or do this and do that, as some states have done. We thought it required much more thought in California for us to do it. We should try to do it and do it right. And we should do it with things that we think will actually make a difference, not just handing out things to individuals, but what really will make a difference. And we think that will be important. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Assemblymember Weber, for joining us today. It was very interesting to hear you, and we are all in the same boat, hoping that all of this crisis and all of the things that are happening right now are actually going to end up creating systemic change, and just not going back to what it was, but going back to something better.
Exactly.